Hi everyone, Tyler Manion here, NPC and IFBB Pro League Vice President, and this will be the Arnold Classic recap for men's open bodybuilding. This recap is brought to you by Superpower. So I just want to say this show was amazing. I feel like the majority of guys showed up it was very impressive, the overall conditioning of this show. We had some great battles between everybody, from basically, I would say, in pairs from first and second all the way down to seventh and eighth. And it was just a really, really awesome show. One of the most probably exciting and energy-filled shows that I can remember seeing. Definitely, even with the amazing coverage, in the videos and everything else, being there live in person is really a different story, especially with these open guys. You can really appreciate what they bring to the stage, and it's definitely worth coming out to see them. And right now, I got to give a shameless plug for the Pittsburgh Pro this year. You're going to see some of these guys and some of the best open guys in the world on the expo stage. So normally, at the Arnold the Olympia, you only see these guys at the night show. They will be judged for pre-judging on the expo stage Saturday afternoon. So make sure you guys go out there and get your tickets to the show. I'm really looking forward to that as well. But now back to the Arnold. We had an amazing battle with Derek and Samson for the top two. For Friday night, I feel that Derek absolutely nailed it. Samson came in for himself, I think, just a little bit off. And then going into Saturday, Samson did a complete 180. I feel like he brought a look that was very similar with his look from the Olympia. However, Derek looked just as good, if not better, than he did on Friday night. So we'll go pose by pose and give a breakdown with these guys, and I'll say how I had it for prejudging and also how I had it for finals. First up was the front double bicep pose. This pose for Derek obviously improved tremendously from the Olympia until now. His legs came up in size a lot. Quads were greatly improved. Also, the separation and the detail in the quads was very, very deep. Upper body wise, I feel like his waistline got a little bit bigger over the last year, was brought back in. And I still think there is a slight imbalance between his upper and his lower body, but not much. It definitely shrunk, and his overall conditioning was unbelievable. Obviously, he has an amazing taper coming down into that nice small waist. With the waist being smaller and the legs being bigger, it brings more of that balance back together. And overall, the pose just is very, very impressive from him. Friday night, Samson's front double bicep, I feel like it's one of his stronger poses. However, on Friday, the lines just weren't there. They were not deep enough. And of course, as we pose them more and more, I feel like he faded more and more. So on Friday night, I gave this pose to Derek easily. Now on Saturday, Samson brought in his conditioning a lot more. And when Samson brings in that conditioning, you can see when those lines get deep in his legs, all throughout his torso, even his arms, you see the overall balance and also the overall size that Samson brings, also with a very tiny waist. He was also able to control his waist much better on Saturday. His vacuum was much better and his overall waist control was much better. So for me, on Saturday night, I switched this pose over to Samson narrowly. Next up is the front lat spread. Another greatly improved pose for Derek. First of all, he switched up how he's hitting the pose completely. He's posing much, much better now. You're able to see all the detail, which was much improved on his outer arms and shoulders. Also, with his hand placement on his torso, you're able to see how flaring and how wide his lats really are. Again, coming down into a nice small waist. And again, his quads greatly improved, greatly separated, and greatly conditioned. The one thing that obviously he can improve here, not only in this pose, but his overall physique, is still more of that chest thickness and chest detail can still come out more. But again, it was improved from the Olympia. Then for Samson, Samson has a solid front lat spread. He has a very full and thick chest. His arms and shoulders flow really well with his torso. He has a small waist. And again, his legs are, some of the best in the entire pro league. However, on Friday, again, same thing with the front double. The lines weren't deep. The lines weren't there and were fading. This pose on Friday went to Derek for me. On Saturday, with Samson tightened up, I feel like this was an extremely close pose. I was definitely going back and forth as we were going through comparisons with them on who I would give this pose to, but Samson's lines stayed, they were deeper, and because of the overall balance, also better waist control and everything else, I narrowly gave this pose to Samson on Saturday night. Next up is the side chest. For me, this is Samson's strongest and best pose. He's very wide across the top of the shoulders. His chest is very full, very round, and very thick. His arms and shoulders look great in this pose. His waistline is under control. and his side leg is massive and still has lines in it. So Friday, even though the lines weren't as deep, he is very dominant and dwarfing in this pose. Derek improved this pose again, another pose again. Derek's just improved everything, but he changed the way he hit this pose. Also, he improved it a ton. Derek's side leg was just gnarly. The lines and the conditioning were absolutely insane. His chest thickness has definitely gotten better. He has more detail when he was pulling the chest over. His outer arm and shoulder, again, the detail from the outer arms and the shoulders, I feel like have gotten better from his prior showings. But you see when you're looking at the width and the fullness and the roundness across the top, Samson just really dominates when it does this. I also think Derek lifts up his back shoulder. He was lifting up his back shoulder a little bit too much. If he can keep everything the same and keep those shoulders more level to give him more width across the top, I think that will help him. But even when Samson's off, this is a very, very strong pose. I gave this pose to Samson on both Friday and Saturday night. Next up is the back double bicep pose. Samson's back double bicep has been improving over the last couple of years. I think muscularity-wise, it improved just a little bit again from the Olympia. He added a little bit more thickness and depth back there, a little bit more width as well. Obviously, his legs from the back are very, very good, very wide. Hamstrings, you see the lines in his hamstrings. Although conditioning-wise on Friday night wasn't nearly the same as Saturday. But again, it's a pose that's improving for him. Obviously, we have Derek. Derek is just lights out from the back, especially in this pose. Outer arm and shoulder detail was crisp all the way into his back. Obviously, his back in the back double is the best in the entire IFBB Pro League right now. The conditioning, the thickness, the depth, just a 3D look that he brings in this pose is absolutely incredible. Go down into his lower body, extremely conditioned. I also think that his leg width improved. His leg width and size from the back improved from his past showings, even from when he won the Olympia. I think he was greatly improved with that leg size that came up. I feel like this pose is just extremely strong for him, and it's something that when anybody's on stage and they hit the pose, your eyes just go immediately to Derek. This was an easy pose for him on both nights, Friday and Saturday. Next up is the back lat spread pose. Again, for Samson, it's another pose that I feel like he's definitely been improving. You can see the width and also the thickness of his back has consistently improved, especially on the width part with how big of a guy he is. That added width really helps him hang with a lot of guys in this pose now. Again, like I said about his lower body, it's, one of the best in the entire Pro League. When he's on like he was on Saturday, it's very, very impressive. However, again, you go to Derek. Derek's back lat spread is extremely strong. You get that 3D look, the thickness, the width, everything's there. Combine it with the lower body. It's just an unbelievable combination of conditioning, thickness, and muscle from head to toe. I still think Derek can pose this pose just a little bit better. I feel like he has a little bit more to give with getting his lats out. I think it has more to do with how he gets into the pose, but still it was an improvement on how he was hitting it even at the Olympia last year because he was struggling to get the lats out all the way, which is a scary thought because if he can improve this pose even a little bit more, it becomes even a more dominant pose for him. So both nights, this was definitely a pose for Derek on Friday and Saturday. Next up is the side tricep pose. Maybe I'm misspeaking, but this posing change was absolutely critical for Derek and extremely impressive to turn a pose that was an okay pose for him into an incredible pose for him. The whole entire way that he angled his torso, you see the width from shoulder to shoulder across the top. You can see he still has thickness to his chest. All of a sudden, go down into his waistline. His abs were in. His core was tight and conditioned. His stomach absolutely flat. Then we look at his arm and shoulder on the outside here where he's flexing his tricep. Much improved. Look at the detail and the conditioning and the lines that are coming out there. The size balances with his entire torso. Then again, you look down to his lower body. Derek's side leg was absolutely unbelievable when it comes to conditioning and size and the separation that he was displaying. This pose actually reminds me of how Jay used to hit his side tricep, which is one of his most impressive poses. Derek made huge changes to this, and out of nowhere, your eyes immediately got drawn to him when he hit the side tricep. Samson's side tricep is normally, I would say, a pretty strong pose for him. On Friday night, he was having trouble controlling his midsection the whole entire time. Again, the side leg, while incredible in size and thickness, just like in the side chest, the lines just weren't there. But when you combine the separation and the lines not being there, on Friday, it was a very, very easy pose to give to Derek. I think on Saturday, this pose got a lot closer. Samson was hitting this pose a little bit better. The angle of his upper body, the way he was controlling his midsection, the lines and separation in his midsection, also in his side leg. However, still on Saturday, I gave this pose to Derek. The pose was just very clean, very balanced, and just the pop and separation was very, very impressive to see. Next up is the ab and thigh. And why I said I might have misspoke on the side tricep is because Derek made another huge change for this pose with the ab and thigh. Major, major changes from how he's hit it his whole entire time in his career. It brought a completely different and very impressive look for him. First, he stood more upright. The waist sucked all the way in. You see how small that waistline was. And the abs popping out. You see the detail and the definition to his abs. I still think Derek can have deeper abs, but you saw the difference when he was hitting this compared to every other time he's ever been on stage. Then he would transition into the one arm still overhead, one leg forward, back half hitting a most muscular with his upper body. And the way he was flexing his quad, when he got into this variation of the ab and thigh, I thought it was super, super strong. Obviously, he can still use a little bit more thickness to the chest, especially on the side where his foot is back more and he's flexing his chest. But the way his abdominals looked, the conditioning and the separation, the way he flexed his quad made his quad very, very impressive. Overall, again, this was a super, super strong pose. You compare that to Samson. Samson was struggling to keep his waistline in, his stomach flat, basically just controlling through his breathing and controlling his abs. The lines just weren't there on Friday. On Saturday, he did a much better job, obviously because his conditioning was better, his lines and separation were better. But even then, you can still see that Derek just had that next level separation, next level midsection control. And for me, a pose that was arguably his weakest or second weakest pose became a strength in this show, and I gave Derek this pose on both nights. Last up is your favorite most muscular pose. Obviously, this pose is very, very strong for Samson. Friday night, even without the lines and the detail, you still see the fullness, the roundness, and just how massive he is when he hits this pose. Then Derek, this is Derek's probably weakest pose. It's the pose he struggles with the most. He went with a different variation here that showcased more of the small waist and his midsection that his abs were in and detailed. I think for him, it's just it's going to be hard to find still yet that best, most muscular pose. I didn't mind this one at all. I still thought it looked good on him. But when you're standing next to someone like Samson, it's just very hard to stand next to. And then, of course, when Samson got better on Saturday, it was a very, very easy pose to give him with all of his lines and separation and his legs and upper body really coming out. So on both nights, this pose went to Samson. So if you count this up, pre-judging, I had 6 poses for Derek, 2 poses for Samson. For the finals, I had it split 4 poses to 4. Now, when it's split 4 poses to 4, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it to see how are you going to make the differentiation between these two guys when they're winning basically the same amount of poses. You can go by, who's winning the poses by more, basically. Obviously, Derek has very, very strong poses from the back, very dominating poses. I don't think Samson outright dominated any pose. Even his strongest pose is the side chest. I think Derek was hanging right there with him. Derek's side chest was very impressive. So Derek had 2 poses that were outstanding. Every other pose I felt was relatively close. Then when it comes down to just overall polish, separation, and conditioning, Derek was just next level at this show. For me, that was the main deciding factor between these two on Saturday night. As you see, it was a very close show. Only 3 points decided on Friday. A 1-point show on Saturday. Both guys obviously got some first place votes both nights. I think that this just shows it's very, very exciting at the top of the IFBB Pro League right now. You have the past 3 Mr. Olympias are all on each other's heels. You never know who's going to beat one or the other. Then right behind them, you have multiple top guys that are right at their heels that are also going to make a big statement to say that they are also in the mix as well. So I feel like this year's Olympia couldn't be more exciting. I feel like there's a lot of guys that are very, very close to each other, and that's just what makes the sport exciting. Next up, we'll go into 3rd place, Andrew Jacked. I feel like this was a very impressive version of Andrew, even though it may have been a little bit downsized. Why do I say this? Is because this was the best condition that we've seen Andrew in, but you can see that he still has some flaws that he needs to work on to hang with the 2 guys ahead of him. So one thing I would say is I felt like his overall leg size was down, especially from the front. The quads just weren't as full and he didn't display the leg width and size that he needs to, especially with how big and dominant his upper body is. So the leg size definitely needs to come up from the front, from the side as well, especially in the hamstring department. And also it could use some more size from the back as well. I would say another thing he needs to work on is overall posing. His front lat spread, which is normally a very, very strong pose for him, he was really shrugging his shoulders and not getting his lats all the way out. I feel like he made improvement to the side chest pose. He's definitely hitting it much better. You just see that again, his upper body, his arms, shoulders, his chest is very impressive, and he just needs that balance with his lower body still. Also in the lower body, you need the same level of conditioning and that separation that he displays in his upper body. The back double bicep, he was pinching throughout his traps. Again, he wasn't opening up his back all the way a lot of the time. He really didn't do it at all on Friday. On Saturday, he did it a little bit here and there, but he needs to make sure that he's hitting that pose better. Same with the back lat spread. He rounds his shoulders and flattens out his back a little bit more. He could still use a little bit more of that thickness, to get that 3D look to his back, but I think the posing differences can make a big difference in those poses. The side tricep, he was hitting a different way as well. I feel like he's on the right track for that, but he still needs to be able to position his body better. Body positioning is very important in these side poses. The biggest thing you can look at is how Derek positioned himself in the side tricep now and what a difference that made. Once Andrew can find the right angle, his upper body in the side tricep pose is going to be absolutely unbelievable. His lower body just needs, to improve a little bit more. Again, just like the side chest, to make it a crazy pose for him. Ab and thigh, always incredible. I like the variation in the new pose that he did for the most muscular. It was definitely crazy looking. Only will be crazier when he improves the legs more. But overall, I thought it was a very good showing from him. And, there's a lot that he can build on from this show. In fourth place, we had Brandon. I feel like this was the best version of Brandon that we've seen since 2019. His legs definitely came way up from what they've been the last couple of years, not only in size, but also separation and detail. His conditioning was very, very strong. Obviously, he has a really nice physique that flows really, really well. Front double bicep, great. Front lat spread, great. Side chest and side tricep, always extremely strong poses. I feel like for Brandon right now, his back double bicep and back lat spread, I think he may have lost just a little bit of volume to his back. You could see when he was next to the three guys that placed ahead of him, the difference on the backside with the upper body, but also the lower body as well. So if he can bring those back poses up and add a little bit more volume there, that will make a big, big difference for him. But the conditioning is arguably the best we've actually ever seen on him. And again, just a beautiful, balanced, and flowing and symmetrical physique that is still very dangerous to anybody that's competing next to him. Then last up in fifth place, we had William. I think William came in great condition. His conditioning was very good on Friday. It was even better on Saturday night. His side poses, very, very strong. Side chest, side tricep. I feel like from last year to this year, a little bit more on his width. I feel like he brought his waistline in just a touch, and he added a little bit more width back to his lats. I think he improved from last year to this year, which, made his back double obviously a strong pose. He has that 3D look, even though it could still use a little bit more width. That thickness is very, very impressive. His legs from the back, very impressive. I feel like his quads from the front came up in size as well. So for him, I think it's a great showing to build off as well. I know Brandon and William are two of the older guys on stage, but they brought very, very impressive looks that are still right in there with the best of the best in the world. So overall, I thought it was an unbelievable show, a great way to kick off the 2025 season, and I'm super pumped to see what the rest of the season holds. Obviously, like I said earlier, we're going to have a lot of top guys at the Pittsburgh Pro. I'm sure we're going to have more top guys competing against each other as well at other shows this year because of the opportunities and the prize money that is out there. So get ready for an extremely exciting 2025 season, and I can't wait to see it unfold.